There's a fear we don't often name, the fear of being too much for the people we love. Too emotional, too messy, too unsure, too broken. It shows up when we hesitate to text a friend late at night, afraid we're bothering them. It shows up when we cancel plans because we don't want our sadness to bring down the mood. It shows up when we smile even though we're hurting, not out of strength, but out of fear that our pain is inconvenient. We learn, often quietly, that people prefer the light version of us, the upbeat one, the one who listens more than speaks, the one who holds space for everyone else, but asks for very little in return. So we start to measure our value by how little space we take up, by how easy we are to love, by how quickly we can bounce back. But inside, there's a part of us that's tired. It's not from being strong, but from pretending to be okay. We don't want to be fixed. We don't want advice. We just want to know that we can fall apart and still be loved. We don't have to perform stability to stay connected. Researcher Brown wrote, "Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage." But it doesn't always feel that way. Vulnerability feels risky. It feels like saying, "Here's the messy part of me. Will you still stay?" And because we're so afraid the answer might be no, we often never ask the question. This guilt, the kind that whispers you're too much, usually starts early. Maybe you were the quiet child who didn't want to cause trouble, the one who sensed when the room was tense and learned to stay small. Maybe no one ever said it out loud, but you felt it, that your needs were inconvenient. Your emotions were too big, your sadness made people uncomfortable. So you became good at editing yourself. You smiled when you didn't feel like it. You learned to be low maintenance. You told people I'm fine, even when you were unraveling inside. Somewhere along the way, you began to believe that love is something you have to earn by not needing too much of it. And as you got older, that belief deepened. You apologized for crying. You over-explained your feelings. You convinced yourself that asking for support was selfish. Or worse, embarrassing. You thought strength meant silence and vulnerability meant weakness. Therapist Nedra Glover Tawwab once said, "People who feel like a burden often come from environments where their needs were neglected." That's the quiet truth many of us carry. We didn't learn that we could be loved in our weakness, only in our usefulness. So now, when you're hurting, really hurting, you feel guilty for showing it. You isolate, you shrink, you overcompensate. You tell yourself, "I'll reach out when I'm doing better," even though what you actually need is someone to hold space while you're still not okay. And that guilt, it doesn't mean you're a burden. It means you were taught to believe you had to be perfect to be loved. But you don't. You never did. It doesn't happen all at once. We don't wake up one day and decide to disappear. Instead, we begin to shrink in small ways. We stop talking about what really hurts. We say, "I'm tired," instead of "I'm lonely." Cancel calls because we don't want to cry in front of someone who might not understand. We make ourselves easier to love by making ourselves harder to know. We become experts at hiding, even in plain sight. We tell jokes when we're hurting. We change the subject when someone gets too close. We don't want to be seen as dramatic or needy or fragile, so we keep editing, till even we forget what the unfiltered version of us sounds like. And over time, that quiet shrinking becomes the shape of our lives. We stop asking for check-ins, say it's okay, I understand even when we don't. We become the one who listens but never shares, who shows up for others but disappears when we need someone to show up for us. It's lonely, but it feels safer than the risk of being seen and misunderstood. The poet Nayyirah Waheed once wrote, "Stay soft. It looks beautiful on you." But softness can feel dangerous when you've learned that the world prefers you hard, silent, composed. So you armor up. And the longer you wear that armor, the heavier it gets. Eventually, you don't just hide your sadness from others. You hide it from yourself. You forget that you were never meant to carry this alone. And it's not a weakness to need, to feel, to ask, because you weren't made to shrink. You were made to be whole, even when you're hurting. I wish someone had told you that being in pain doesn't make you less lovable, that your sadness isn't a stain, that needing support isn't something to apologize for. I wish someone had looked you in the eye, on one of those days when you could barely hold yourself together, and said, "You're allowed to fall apart here. I'm not going anywhere." I wish someone had reminded you that your softness is not a burden, it's a gift. That the way you feel deeply, care fully, break openly, none of that is weakness. I wish someone had said, "You don't have to smile through this. You don't have to minimize your pain so I can stay close. You don't have to filter your sadness to make it easier for me to witness." I wish someone had sat beside you in silence, not trying to fix you, not rushing your healing, not offering solutions you didn't ask for. Just being there, steady, safe, present. Because sometimes what we need most is not advice, but company. Author Brianna Wyest once wrote, "True healing happens when someone sees the broken parts of you and chooses to stay." I wish you had known that kind of presence. The kind that doesn't flinch when you cry. The kind that doesn't treat your struggle like a project to manage. And maybe no one said those words. Maybe no one stayed when you needed them most. But you're here now. You're still standing. And I hope you'll let yourself believe that those words were always true, even if you didn't hear them in time. Because you've never been too much. You've only ever needed more gentleness than the world knew how to give you. You are not a burden. Not on the days when you feel broken. Not when you're anxious, withdrawn, tired, or scared. Not when you can't offer joy, can't hold a conversation, or can't find a reason to get out of bed. You are not a burden just because your pain makes the room quieter. You are not a burden for needing time or space or reassurance. You are not a burden for being uncertain, for healing slowly, for showing up messy. You are human. You are allowed to take up space, even when you're not at your best, especially then. The lie that says people will only stay if you're easy to love has done so much harm. It has made you question your place. It has made you apologize for things that were never wrong, like feeling too much like crying in public, like saying, "I'm not okay." But love, real love, doesn't run from those moments. It leans in. Therapist Dr. Thema Bryant says, "You were never meant to heal in isolation." Right. And it's true. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world on your own. Just because you learned to survive quietly doesn't mean you're supposed to. Just because you were told you're too much doesn't make it true. You are not a burden. Your healing is not a burden. Your needs are not a burden. Your existence, even on the hardest days, still holds value. And the people who truly see you, who really love you, won't ask you to shrink for their comfort. They'll meet you where you are. Even when you feel like pieces, they'll remind you, you're still whole. If today feels heavy, if your heart is tired and your mind won't stop spinning, I hope you know this. You are still allowed to exist exactly as you are. Even if you're quiet, even if you're undone, even if nothing makes sense right now. You're not failing for feeling this way. Sometimes healing looks like getting out of bed. Sometimes it looks like letting yourself cry. Sometimes it looks like saying no, or not today, or please stay. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to be inspiring. You just need to be here, and that's enough. I hope you remember that being broken is not the same as being unworthy. That your value isn't tied to how productive you are, or how well you hide your pain. That some of the most beautiful people you know have walked through seasons of deep grief and come out softer, not lesser. Poet Rupi Kaur once wrote, "If you were born with the weakness to fall, you were born with the strength to rise." And that rise doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be fast. Sometimes rising just means breathing through another day, and that is something to be proud of. So if no one has told you this lately, I will. You're not a burden. You're a soul in process. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep going. Gently, slowly, at your own pace. You are loved, even here, even now.